Welcome to LexTalks Legal Topics Simplified,
Yeah.
the platform where we like to break down these complex legal concepts into bite-sized pieces that you can
Yeah.
actually digest.
Yeah, exactly.
Today, we are diving deep into something particularly relevant for all of you wonderful law students in India,
Yeah.
the rule against perpetuity
Mm.
and the distinction between vested and contingent interests.
Right.
We found
These
that
are essential concepts for anyone
maybe
dealing with property law in India.
kind of a daunting topic when you first start learning about it.
Absolutely.
But don't worry, we are going to untangle it together.
Yeah, we'll break it down.
So let's start with this idea of perpetuity.
Okay.
I mean, I know what it means basically forever,
Right.
but what does that mean like in a legal context, especially when it comes to property?
You're on the right track.
Okay.
In legal terms, perpetuity refers to the attempt to control property indefinitely
Okay.
from beyond the grave.
Oh.
It's like trying to dictate what happens to your property centuries from now.
Okay.
Right.
And why does the law have a problem with that?
Right.
Isn't it my property? Shouldn't I be able to like decide what happens to it even after I'm gone?
That's a great question, and that's the heart of this whole issue.
Okay.
Imagine a world where property is locked up in endless chains of transfers,
Oh,
with
yeah.
conditions piling up over generations.
Right.
That wouldn't exactly make for a very dynamic and fair system.
I see what you're saying.
Right.
It could get pretty messy pretty fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The rule against perpetuity exists to prevent precisely that,
Okay.
to prevent that from happening.
So it's kind of a safeguard.
Yeah, a safeguard.
Okay.
There's even a quote that captures this rationale perfectly, and I love this quote.
Oh, okay.
It is illogical to imagine a dead person below the grave controlling properties above his grave.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. I love that.
That's a pretty powerful image.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does this rule actually work in practice?
So the rule against perpetuity aims to strike a balance.
It acknowledges your right to dispose of your property as you see fit,
Okay.
but it also recognizes the need for property to be freely circulating in society.
Right.
It prevents property from becoming tied up indefinitely,
Right.
which in turn promotes trade and commerce.
Oh, so it has like economic implications as well.
Absolutely, it has economic development implications.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So it's not just about like individual rights. It's about
it's about the flow.
the broader
Yeah.
system.
Yeah, the health of the system.
Yeah. Okay.
You're absolutely right. It's not just about economics, though.
Right. Because you mentioned fairness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The rule against perpetuity also upholds principles of equality and justice
Okay.
by preventing the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few for an indefinite period.
Oh, I see.
It ensures a fair distribution of resources across generations.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So where does this rule come from in Indian law?
Right.
Is it some kind of like ancient legal principle?
It's rooted in history, but not that ancient.
Okay.
In India, the primary legislation addressing perpetuity is the Transfer of Property Act of 1882, often abbreviated as the TOPA.
Yes. The TOPA, every law student's favorite bedtime reading.
Right.
But seriously, though, I know the TOPA can be a bit dense.
Yeah.
Can you break down this rule in a way that even a sleep-deprived law student can understand?
Of course, the essence of the rule is enshrined in Section 14 of the TOPA.
Okay.
It essentially says that you can't transfer property in a way that pushes the actual ownership or enjoyment of that property too far into the future.
So there's a time limit.
Precisely. The law sets a maximum time frame, often called the perpetuity period,
Okay.
within which the transfer must take effect.
Okay.
This period is calculated based on the date of the transfer, the lifetimes of the individuals involved, and a potential period for an unborn beneficiary to reach the age of majority.
So it's not just a fixed number of years. It's
Right.
dependent on like the people involved.
Think of it as a chain of lives plus a bit of extra time.
Sure.
The idea is to allow for reasonable transfers to future generations,
Okay.
while preventing property from being locked up for excessively long periods.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And what happens if someone tries to transfer property beyond this like permissible perpetuity period?
Right.
Is it just like a minor legal hiccup or?
Not quite.
Sure.
Any attempt to transfer property beyond the perpetuity period renders the entire transfer void.
Oh, wow.
It's as if the transfer never happened
Okay, so that's it.
in the eyes of the law.
Yeah, that's a pretty serious consequence.
It is a serious consequence.
Like you really have to understand this rule
You really have
to make sure you're not messing things up.
Yeah, and that's why we're taking this deep dive today.
Exactly.
To make sure you have a firm grasp of the rule against perpetuity and its implications.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. I'm convinced. Let's break down the specifics of Section 14.
Okay.
What are the, like, crucial elements that we need to watch out for?
Great question. To determine if a transfer falls under Section 14, we need to look for a few essential elements.
Okay.
The first and most obvious is that a transfer of property must occur.
Right.
You can't have a rule against perpetuity if there's no property being transferred in the first place.
Right. That makes sense.
Hmm.
What's next?
The second element is that this transfer must create an interest
Right.
in favor of an ultimate beneficiary.
Okay.
Now, this beneficiary doesn't have to be someone currently alive.
Oh.
It could be an unborn child, for example.
So hypothetically, I could transfer property to my future grandchild, even though they don't exist yet.
Yes,
Okay.
but there are limitations, of course.
Right.
The transfer to an unborn child can't just hang in limbo forever.
Okay.
It needs to be connected to the lifetime of a living person.
Okay.
For instance, the property might be held by someone else during their lifetime and then pass on to the unborn child later.
Oh, so the unborn child's interest is kind of dependent on this living person.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that brings us to the third element. The ultimate beneficiary,
Okay.
in this case, your future grandchild,
Right.
must be in existence, either already born or in the womb, when the interest of the living person ends.
So you can't transfer property to, like, someone who might never be born.
Exactly.
Okay, that's logical.
Right.
And finding the fourth element.
The fourth element focuses on the timing of the transfer.
Okay.
The transfer of the property can only be postponed until the end of the living person's life, and then for the duration of the ultimate beneficiary's minority,
Okay.
which in India is until they reach the age of 18, you can't push it beyond that point.
So there's a clear
There's a cutoff.
cutoff
You
point.
can't just keep delaying it indefinitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Any attempt to extend the transfer beyond this period would violate the rule against perpetuity and make the entire transfer void.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, this is starting to become much clearer now.
Good say.
I'm seeing how all these elements kind of fit together.
It's like a legal puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah.
All these elements need to be present for a transfer to potentially fall under the purview of Section 14.
Yeah.
But understanding these elements is only part of the story.
Right.
We also need to know how they play out in real-life situations.
Absolutely. Real-life examples always help to solidify these concepts.
Of course.
Do you have any scenarios that could help us see how Section 14 works in practice?
Of course. Let's imagine a scenario.
Okay.
Picture this.
All right.
A successful entrepreneur, let's call her Miss Sharma, wants to create a lasting legacy for her family.
Go.
She decides to set up a trust that will hold a prime piece of real estate and generate income for her descendants.
Okay.
Her vision is for this trust to benefit not only her children and grandchildren, but also her great-grandchildren and generations to come.
Okay. That sounds like a fairly common way to manage wealth and pass it down through a family.
Yeah.
What's the potential issue here in terms of the rule against perpetuity?
The problem lies in the timing
Okay.
and the uncertainty surrounding when the interests of future generations will actually vest.
Okay.
Let's analyze Ms. Sharma's plan using the elements we discussed earlier.
Okay.
First, we have a transfer of property to the trust.
Right.
Second, this transfer creates an interest for the ultimate beneficiaries, her descendants, including those yet to be born.
Okay.
And third, there's a living person involved, likely Ms. Sharma herself, who may be a trustee or hold some interest in the property during her lifetime.
So far, it seems like everything is in order, but I suspect the fourth element, the timing, might be where things get a bit tricky.
You're spot on.
Okay.
The transfer to Mrs. Sharma's great-grandchildren and those even further down the line is contingent on them actually being born and then possibly reaching a certain age. We simply don't know when these events will occur.
Okay.
It's entirely possible that some of these beneficiaries might not even be born within the perpetuity period,
Oh, yes.
let alone be eligible to receive their share of the trust.
So Miss Sharma's well-intentioned plan to provide for her family far into the future could be jeopardized by this rule.
Exactly. In this scenario, the transfer to those distant descendants could be deemed void because it might vest outside the permitted time frame.
Okay.
The law would step in and say, hold on, you can't control this property from beyond the grave for an indefinite period.
So this really highlights the importance of careful planning and drafting when it comes to these legal documents.
Absolutely. A slight oversight or ambiguity in the wording could have unintended and potentially disastrous consequences.
Right.
And while there are strategies and legal mechanisms to navigate the rule against perpetuity,
Right.
Those are best discussed in a separate deep dive.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Let's stay focused on these core concepts for now.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier the distinction between vested and contingent interests.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure.
I think that's where a lot of law students, myself included, often get a bit confused.
It's a crucial distinction to understand, especially in the context of the rule against perpetuity.
Okay.
Let's break it down. Imagine you've booked a flight ticket for a trip next month. You've paid for it, and it's confirmed.
Okay.
That's analogous to a vested interest. You have a present and certain right to that flight,
Okay.
even though the actual travel is in the future.
Oh, I see.
Right.
So vested interest means you have a guaranteed right to the property.
Yes.
Even if you don't possess it or enjoy it right away.
Precisely.
Okay.
Now, let's say you're on the waiting list for that same flight.
Okay.
You might get a seat, you might not.
Right.
It all depends on whether other passengers cancel or if the airline overbooks.
Yeah.
That's similar to a contingent interest.
Okay.
Your right to the property is conditional and uncertain.
I see.
It depends on a specific event happening.
So a contingent interest is like a maybe, right?
Yeah.
And a vested interest is like a definite yes.
Exactly.
Something like that.
And this distinction plays a crucial role in determining whether a transfer violates the rule against perpetuity.
Okay.
The rule primarily concerns itself with contingent interests. If a contingent interest might vest too far into the future,
Right.
beyond the perpetuity period, it's deemed void.
Got it.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example to illustrate how this works in practice?
Sure. Let's say Mr. Kapoor creates a will stating that his house will go to his son Rahul for life and then to Rahul's children.
Okay.
In this scenario, Rahul has a vested interest in the property
Okay.
because he has a definite right to enjoy it during his lifetime.
So Rahul is guaranteed to benefit from the property,
Exactly.
regardless of like whether he has children or not.
Exactly.
Okay.
But what about Rahul's children?
Okay. Yeah.
Their interest is contingent.
Okay.
They only get the property if they're alive when Rahul passes away.
Right.
If Rahul doesn't have children, or if they predecease him, their contingent interest simply disappears.
Oh, okay. So their right to the property is hanging on a condition
Yes.
that may or may not be fulfilled.
Exactly.
What happens if Mr. Kapoor's will added another condition, like saying that Rahul's children must reach the age of 30 to inherit the house?
That's where the rule against perpetuity kicks in.
Okay.
We need to assess whether Rahul's children might reach the age of 30 within the perpetuity period.
Okay.
If there's a chance they might not,
Yeah.
that contingent interest could be considered void.
Wow, this is really fascinating.
Yeah,
I'm starting to see the interplay between these concepts
you're getting it.
and how the rule against perpetuity works to balance individual property rights with the broader needs of society.
You're getting it.
Yeah.
And to make things even more interesting, the rule against perpetuity isn't a static concept.
Yeah.
It's been subject to interpretations, modifications,
Okay.
and even debates over its continued relevance in modern times.
Now we're talking, this is the kind of legal intrigue I signed up for.
Yeah.
So what are some of the recent trends and developments surrounding this rule?
Well, in some jurisdictions, there's a growing movement to relax the strictness of the rule against perpetuity.
Yeah.
People argue that the world has changed significantly since the 19th century.
Right.
And the original justifications for the rule might not hold as strongly in today's dynamic environment.
So they're basically saying we need to give people more flexibility in controlling their property from beyond the grave.
In a sense, yes.
Okay.
Some jurisdictions have adopted a wait-and-see approach.
Um,
Instead of automatically invalidating a transfer that might violate the rule,
yeah.
they wait to see if the interest actually vests within the perpetuity period.
Oh, so instead of just assuming the worst, you just kind of observe how things unfold.
Exactly.
Okay. Are there any other approaches being considered?
Another trend is the increasing use of trusts as a sophisticated tool to manage property over extended periods. Trusts can be structured in ways that might circumvent the traditional limitations of the rule against perpetuity.
So trusts offer more flexibility.
Yeah, more flexibility in estate planning.
But I imagine that raises questions about whether they're undermining the original intent of the rule.
Exactly. The use of trusts in this context has sparked debates about whether they're being used appropriately
Right.
or whether they're eroding the principles of free circulation and equitable distribution of property that the rule was designed to uphold.
It sounds like the rule against perpetuity is still very much a live wire in the legal world.
It certainly is. And in India, where land ownership and inheritance are so deeply intertwined with cultural and social norms,
Yeah.
the rule against perpetuity continues to play a significant role in shaping how property is managed and transferred across generations.
Well, this deep dive has been incredibly enlightening.
I'm glad.
I feel like I've gained a much clearer understanding of this very complex rule.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. But remember, this is just the beginning.
Right.
There are many layers to the rule against perpetuity,
Okay.
and exploring its nuances and applications can be a fascinating journey for any aspiring legal mind.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, is there a key takeaway
Yeah,
or a thought-provoking question that our listeners could ponder on their own?
I think it's worth considering this. What are the strongest arguments for and against relaxing the rule against perpetuity?
Hmm.
How do we balance the desire for individual autonomy in estate planning
Okay.
with the need for a fair and dynamic property market?
Yeah.
These are questions that legal scholars and practitioners continue to grapple with,
Yeah.
and they lie at the heart of this evolving area of law. These are questions that legal scholars and practitioners continue to grapple with,
Yeah.
and they lie at the heart of this evolving area of law.
It's fascinating to think that a rule conceived in the 19th century still has such a profound impact on how we deal with property today.
Absolutely.
It really underscores the enduring nature of legal principles
Yeah.
and how they adapt to changing times.
And as technology advances and societal norms evolve,
Right.
we can expect even more nuanced interpretations and perhaps even legislative reforms to the rule against perpetuity.
So it's not going away anytime soon.
It's not going away anytime soon.
Uh,
It's a dynamic area of law that will continue to challenge legal minds for years to come.
well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground today, from the historical underpinnings of the rule to its practical implications
Right.
and even its potential future trajectory.
We've explored the key elements that determine whether a transfer falls under the rule,
Right.
the crucial distinction between vested and contingent interests,
Hmm.
and even delved into some of the contemporary debates surrounding the rule's relevance and application.
I have to say, this deep dive has been incredibly insightful, even a bit mind-bending at times.
Good.
I feel like I've leveled up my understanding of property law significantly.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
As you continue your legal studies, you'll encounter the rule against perpetuity in various contexts,
Oh, yeah.
from contract law to estate planning.
So it's a concept that will keep on giving.
It will keep on giving
Yeah.
in terms of legal challenges and intellectual stimulation.
Precisely. And who knows, maybe one of you listening today will be the one to argue a landmark case
Yes.
or propose groundbreaking reforms to this fascinating rule.
Exactly.
That's an inspiring thought. I think it's safe to say that the rule against perpetuity will continue to be a vital part of the legal landscape,
That's cool.
shaping how we manage and transfer property for generations to come.
And with that thought-provoking note, let's wrap up our deep dive into the rule against perpetuity
Yeah.
and the intricacies of vested versus contingent interests in India.
Thank you so much for joining us on LexTalks.
Yeah.
We hope you found this exploration both informative and engaging.
And remember, the journey of legal learning never truly ends.
Well said.
Keep those legal minds sharp, stay curious, and we'll see you on our next LexTalks deep dive.
Don't forget to subscribe for more engaging legal discussions. Until next time.
Yeah, it sounds like the rule against perpetuity is going to keep us all on our toes for quite a while.
Definitely for a long time to come.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today, though, haven't we?
Yeah, we really have. From the historical underpinnings of the rule to its practical implications and its potential future trajectory.
Yeah, we've explored the key elements that determine whether a transfer falls under the rule,
Right.
the crucial distinction between vested and contingent interests,
Yeah.
and even delved into some of the contemporary debates surrounding the rule's relevance and application.
I have to say, this has been a truly mind-bending deep dive,
I'm glad.
but I feel like I've definitely leveled up my understanding of property law.
That's what we like to hear.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So maybe this is a good place to wrap things up.
Yeah, I think so.
I want to thank you so much for guiding us through this complex topic.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
And to all of our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in to LexTalks,
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Legal Topics Simplified.
Absolutely.
We hope you found this deep dive informative, engaging, and hopefully not too confusing.
Right.
And remember, keep those legal minds sharp, and we'll see you on our next LexTalks Deep Dive.
See you next time.
Don't forget to subscribe for more engaging legal discussions. Until then.